All right, Joel Gausten here from joelgausten.com. This video is the latest in the ongoing New Jersey Hardcore Chronicles, we'll call it, to give a tip of the hat to my old friend Drew Stone. Um, this video, I'm joined by somebody down in Florida currently, but someone who has quite a history in the early 80s New Jersey scene. It's my pleasure to welcome Mr. Ray Brazen. Ray, good to have you here, sir.
Hey, it's great to be here, man. I've been wanting to be on this show, actually. I've been dreaming of being on this show because, you interviewed all these other great people, and, some of whom I've known, and, so many stories that just take me back to those days. It's crazy.
Fantastic. Well, before we get into anything, I've got to thank as usual, when a Jersey guest comes on from this era, I have to thank my agent slash artist liaison, Fuck You, Tommy Productions, for his
I was
part.
talking about him, man.
It was funny because he was texting me. He's like, "You got to talk to Ray Brazen," and then you messaged me totally unconnected, to that text, and I'm like, well, the stars are aligning. I've got to get Ray on, and here we are. So, uh,
Fantastic.
for those who are new to you, not only are you a musician in your own right, which I definitely want to dive into, but
Hmm.
you are somebody who was around that
Yes.
initial, we'll call it like very early 80s New Jersey scene. You
Uh-huh.
running with guys like AOD, Bedlam,
Uh-huh.
by our records, that whole initial,
Yeah.
burst of bands and music that came out. So
Hmm.
we'll get into all that for sure. Unfortunately, we have to talk about Tommy because Tommy plays into this.
Yes, he plays
I was
into this
thinking of a
movie.
way to avoid that, but unfortunately, we can't. So I apologize to the viewer. Tommy's going to come up in this conversation, sadly. Um, but let's kind of get into it pre-Tommy. So we'll have a little bit of peace before it all goes to hell when he comes into the picture. But
All right. Whatever. Let's go.
so you're originally from Elwood Park, right?
Yeah, Elmer Park, born and raised. Well, I was born in Patterson, St. Joseph's,
Okay.
1965.
Okay. So you were in your teens by the time the punk thing sort of started to bubble in Jersey.
I was starting to enter into my teens. Actually, I was only like maybe about 10 or 11 years old when the punk thing started to really happen. It was like when 1976, I saw an article in the New York Daily News about this new thing called punk rock, and it had pictures of the Ramones and the Dictators on it, and looked interesting. And so, I went out. I got the first two punk records I got at the end of '76, beginning of '77, were the first Runaways album and the first Ramones album. And those records were just totally life changing, and that's it. It just grew from there. And then anytime I heard about a new punk band, it was like I was buying records just because I heard, oh, it's the latest punk band. You'll like this if you like punk. And it was like every record was great. I got into the Clash and the Jam and the Buzzcocks and the Stranglers and just all those great bands.
And what's interesting and what comes up quite often when I do these videos about Jersey is, a lot of people found those same early punk records, whether they
Exactly.
were watching a TV news report and they heard about the Ramones. The story's kind of similar, but at the same time, there's actually a local Jersey thing starting to sort of come
Hmm.
to its own. Um, from what I understand, and I'm sorry you found out this way, but apparently you had a high school classmate or someone in your high school, Tommy Kaprowski, was
Yes.
actually the one who unfortunately got you into a lot of this stuff to begin with. Was
Yes.
it Tommy who told you about the Misfits?
I had just started, roaming the halls of Elmer Park High School, and we were passing each other in the halls and kind of staring each other down. It's like, oh, what's this? Are we both punks and everything? What was? And I was like this really small, puny sort of kid, man. I was like, I looked really, really, really young. I could have passed for 10 when I was like 15, practically. But I was wearing my punk pride on my sleeve, and of course I was getting bullied for it by like showing up with all these punk badges. Oh, what are you into this punk? Calling me the F word, for gay and all that. But so anyway, one evening, this was like maybe about the winter of 78, 79. my mom and I went to the shopping center and went shopping, and she went into the Grand Union supermarket, and I went into the Walgreens next door to buy the latest issue of Cream, which was a magazine we all loved and always wrote about punk. And I'm in Walgreens in the magazine section looking through the latest issue of Cream, a little sneak preview. See, somebody comes up behind me, it's like, "Hey, you!" And at first, I think it's a bully, and I'm like, I freeze. It's like, "Hey, there's that little punk rocker." I was like, that was Tommy Kaprowski. So anyway, he's like, "Okay, how much do you know about punk? I'm going to give you like a little quiz. I'm going to give you a list of bands. You're going to tell me like you're going to name a song by each band." So he started with the Pistols, the Ramones. How about the Dead Boys? Oh, Sonic Producer. How about the Buzzcocks? Boredom. It's like all the way down the line, and he was really impressed with my knowledge. It's like, "Okay, name a song by the Misfits," and I was like, "Who?" That's how I found out about the Misfits. It's like that, it's like they're from Lodi, just two towns away from Elwood Park. It's like, and I have a tape. It's like, come to school tomorrow. Find me over at my locker tomorrow, and I'll give you a tape of the Misfits, and you can check them out. So the next day, I went to school, and he slipped me a tape, and it was a bootleg cassette of what we now know as the Static Age record.
Mhm.
So and I just took it home and I put it on and my mind was blown. It was just amazing. I was just wow. It's like we finally found our band, I mean, punk rock was our music, but it wasn't like the Sex Pistols were like necessarily our band or the Ramones were like our band. But the Misfits came along, there was two towns away, and you know, they became our band. It was like these are our local boys, they're right here. So they're our band. So
Yeah,
and
I mean that's how it was for me, but a decade later.
yeah, I know.
I grew up in northern New Jersey where those guys relocated to.
Mhm.
By 95, 94, 95, they're bringing the band back. So for us being high school kids at that time, the Misfits were our band too. Like
Yeah,
just 10 years later, because
yeah,
those
exactly.
up the road.
Yeah. Well, every generation embraced them. Every generation that grew up in Jersey has embraced them. I mean, geez, man, you got Lodi IPs with a wall dedicated to the Misfits.
Yeah, exactly.
I
Yeah.
don't know why the hell they put that photo of Kaprowski and his boys up there, but whatever.
Yeah. Well, I mean, thank God Steve Zing kind of balances it out with Chris because just having Tommy up there would just totally tank the
Yeah, right.
legitimacy of the whole thing. So,
Well, it already did once before, way back in the '80s. So.
so Kaprowski, was he playing in East Patterson Boys Choir at that point?
I know that this was early. This is like around '79 or so. So he and Bruce Wingate, and I went to Elmwood Park High School with him and Bruce Wingate and Jack Steeples from AOD, first of all. And what are we talking about? No, this was earlier. And he and Bruce Wingate and a couple other guys named John Allen and Bill Bayer were in a band called the Executives. And they were pretty much the first Elmwood Park's first punk rock band, actually, pretty much. And they played covers, but they played them pretty well. And in April of 1980, they played Elmwood Park High School's gymnasium, and that was my first punk rock gig. Was watching those guys. I'd already made good friends with them and like palled around with them, some of those guys, and gone to see Uncle Floyd's show at Clifton High School and everything like that. But when I found out they were a band, it really blew my mind. I was like, wow, these guys are, and they played the gymnasium at Elmwood Park High School, and it was like, wow, it was really impressive. So, and that was the first proto, and then after that was the Seductors, and that was in December of 1980 or so, like the full December of 1980. The day after Christmas, they played the Diamond Chips Cafe, which was this very, 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 very short-lived cafe in Passaic, New Jersey, and that was where I made my first onstage appearance ever playing a song in front of a band. I played bass on a version of Pills by the New York Dolls that they played
Hmm.
that night. And they showed me the bass line beforehand, and I kind of sort of got it. And I got up there, the bass weighed a ton, and I'm like really tiny, and the bass is like three times bigger than I, and just it was just funny how but it came off good. I pulled off. I think I did pretty good. I mean, it's like, okay, we're going to play the song again a second time later on, so I guess I guess they liked me enough. And then they had me sing this song called "I'm Gonna Butt Fuck My Baby," which was just like this really stupid, really absurd little blues song that they had. And yeah, December 26th, 1980, at the Diamond Chips Cafe, a place that literally just came, hosted the Seductors gig, and then like went. And then after that, the Seductors became, with a member change or two, they became the East Patterson Boys Choir. And then that was the band that played Clifton City Picnic. And they made a tape that they played like in their cars, like all over town, like all summer long. They just made a tape of themselves, and we would just like be hanging out, drinking and smoking, and like listening to this loud tape that they made, in a place called Zounds. I think it was in Garfield. That you might have heard of it. That
Sure.
played, yeah.
Sure, absolutely. Well, Zounds kind of plays into things a little later because they had people like Mike Morantz was there working. Erie Vaughn worked there for a bit, from what I understand. So
Uh-huh.
that's another sort of institution that's come up in conversation along the
Yeah.
way here. And you sent me a bunch of recordings and links to stuff, and one of which was a recording of you back by, I think it's Steeples, Bruce, and Dave, and you're singing Stepping Stone, right?
Yeah,
That's
yeah, that one. Yeah, that's me, Davey Dawson, my real name. For those of you who know me from the hardcore days in the early 80s, this is Davey Dawson talking to you again after all these years, and you thought you got rid of me, but you didn't. I'm still here. I just wanted to make that point before we went any further forward. Yeah, that was a tape we made. It was the weekend before John Lennon got shot, and Darby Crash overdosed, and it was a Friday night after school, and we were up in Bruce's bedroom, and we had some gear set up, and Bruce and Jack were alternating between the guitar and the drums, and I was like screeching my heart out because I had like this really super high squeaky voice and everything. So we made this tape, and then a friend of ours came over, and we were like, "Hey, let's go for a ride and listen to this tape." It's like, so we put it on the car stereo, and we stop at the deli that Tommy used to work at, Birchwood Deli, and Tom comes out and he hears this tape blasting out of Bruce's car, or this guy's car, and it's like, "Hey, what's that?" It's like, "Oh yeah, we made this tape earlier. Check it out, man. That's Davey Dawson singing." He's like, "Really?" He's like, he listens to it, it's like, "Man, you sound like Johnny Rotten being Goose, man."
yeah,
So
definitely.
yeah, there's four other songs from that tape. I don't know if I should ever put them out or not. They're just it's crazy. It's pretty great stuff.
Absolutely. So, we're looking at 1980 going into 81. Um, what were the main venues that, the bands you were becoming friendly with would play at that time? Obviously there's the show place in Dover.
Oh,
Um, did you kind of keep it Jersey centric, or were you going out to CBGBs and some?
I personally kept my gig going Jersey centric because I mean I was too young and my parents would only let me go to New York on occasion, but I did get to see my share of shows. I mean I got to see the Misfits in June of 1982 at Irving Plaza, so that was pretty great. But there was a lot of Jersey centric stuff going on, but I don't know. They were going back and forth. I mean, the East Patterson Boys Choir actually, I think, played a gig at CBGB's in the summer of '81, not long after the Clifton City Picnic gig, if I remember correctly.
Mm,
So,
yeah, I think you're right. I think there's a flyer floating around. I actually, if I recall correctly, I found that flyer and sent it to Tommy.
mhm.
So I know, all these guys are still kind of around doing stuff even today, which we'll definitely get into. Um, but I know sort of as the bands are getting their things happening and they're playing places, and suddenly, bang, there's a scene in Jersey. Kind of alongside all that is WFMU,
Yes,
and
definitely.
Pat Duncan, the godfather of New Jersey hardcore and punk.
Oh yeah, no question about it. Yeah, yeah,
He put a lot of things on the map, and it's still active kind of behind the scenes. Hello, Pat. He's been very helpful to this channel, actually getting things going. I don't know if I should say that. I'm going to say it anyway. Thank you, Pat.
yeah. He's great, man. I love you, Pat. I know you're still out there. I know you're following me on Facebook and all that shit. I love you,
Yeah.
Pat. Shout
Yeah.
out to you, man. You are
Do
the
you,
Godfather.
do you remember the first time you heard Pat Duncan?
It might have been the night that Morning Noise and Adrenaline OD played there live. Yeah. And I remember tuning in, like his show wasn't all hardcore in the beginning. It was kind of sort of like freeform at the like first hour or so. And then like as started getting into the second and third hours of the show, it gradually shifted over to like a more punk rock thing. So when I first tuned in, I thought I had the wrong station and the wrong show. But then, like, eventually, like, he brought on Morning Noise and they played, and that's the legendary recording, actually, because it's been out a bunch of times. It got reissued a bunch of times, and you can stream it on Bandcamp and stuff. Yeah, that's a great one.
Yeah, and as I've mentioned in past videos, I know I just in the last couple months I had Mike from Buzzkill on,
Yeah,
and I mentioned that because he had the same exposure as that Morning Noise show, which he
yeah,
actually taped that night onto his own cassette. But 91-ish, Pat put out a 7-inch
yeah,
of Morning Noise on one side and the Parasites
yeah. I
on.
remember that. Yeah, the Parasites. Yeah, those
And
guys were
that was a
cool.
huge record for me because, at that time I was pretty young, being of the generation after you guys.
Yeah,
So I'm kind of discovering my own sort of archaeological dig going through old Jersey. I was already into the Misfits and stuff because they're ground floor for, I think, most people, right?
uh-huh.
But then I was digging up the Bedlam record and the Morning Noise stuff that was available, which wasn't much at that point. It was just really the single, and their EP was very hard to come by. The
Yeah,
when they put out,
yeah,
at that point now it's all been reissued and it's all out there again. But yeah, Pat, and I started listening to Pat.
yeah,
So talk about still having the influence a generation later. It's a similar story. It's just,
yeah,
a decade.
yeah,
But I know you really got tied in with FMU to the point where you wrote, a pretty classic song of the era. This is actually a little later. I think it was around 84. You wrote the song "I Found Love" at WFMU.
yeah. Oh,
uh,
yeah.
which from what I understand was, first of all, it's an awesome song. I love it.
Thank
Uh,
you.
but it was directed towards a certain person.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, it was directed towards the bass player from Stand in the Face. Not the one you interviewed, the other one, not Peter Aaron, but one who replaced him, a lady by the name of Michelle, who I thought was, oh man, she was the hottest girl on the scene. I think everybody would agree with me that she was the hottest girl on the scene, and I wrote a song about her. It was just intended as lighthearted and everything because the thing about Pat Duncan's shows were like every Thursday, like all the local punks in town would like show up at the studio and they all just like have like a little party. There'd be a little party going on in the background. You'd hear people talking in the background, and Pat would be talking to people off mic, in the middle of like announcing a set list of like 500,000 songs in a row without a break. I mean,
Yes,
that was the Pat Duncan show at that time. So, and yeah, so Paul from Sand in the Face started bringing Michelle around. And of course, I fell in love. And, I hit it off with those guys. Paul was really nice. And I actually asked their permission to write the song. I was like, I have an idea for a song, it's just going to be fun, lighthearted, nothing intended, no strings attached, can I do it? They said, yeah, go right ahead and do it. And I did it. And Pat played it and the phones lit up. And yeah, I became an FMU star.
fantastic. And you're absolutely right. Pat's show was so freewheeling, even by the time I was showing up there. My first time playing Pat's show, I was still in high school. I was a senior in high school.
Mm-hmm.
I was probably 17. And this, it was in East Orange in the house. And
Yeah.
remember how you'd always have to move your car because people were blocked, the neighbors were
Yeah.
blocked.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Pat would play like 9,000 songs in a row, and then he'd read all 9,000 songs at one point, and he'd have like four bands in one night. It was just like people like crashing into each other at FMU. Everybody's loading their drums in, and oh, who's this band? And I actually met some cool people just playing shows there with other bands. Indecision,
Oh, yeah.
hardcore band from New York comes to mind. Just super cool guys. Um, people you normally wouldn't meet except in
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
show.
I
And
thought it was really impressive how long he kept it going, I mean, right into the 90s and into like the early 2000s, right? Something like that. He
I
hasn't been
think
on in a while.
I think Pat's last show was 2009, I want to say.
Yeah, he went on for quite a while and like right up to the end, having like, three bands on every week, it was like, where do you find all these bands? Like, it's crazy.
And bands too, beyond the Jersey thing, he had bands that later went on to be massive. He had Green Day on,
Yeah,
as one example, and these bands at the time were, they were still sleeping on people's floors, they're living out of a crummy van, but they turn up at FMU.
yeah,
And all these years later, a lot of these bands, there's actually a T-shirt that Pat put out as one
yeah.
of the fun drive things for not, he put out in '98, but it was the previous year for
Uh-huh.
'97, and he listed all the bands that played, and I played a couple times that year, so I'm on the shirt. But
Oh, that's great.
just going through the list of names, you're like, wow, so many of
Yeah,
these people went on to do an actual thing. But Pat was there from ground floor day one for so many bands.
yeah, he was.
Um, like I said, he gave me I was playing on the radio when I was 17 because of Pat Duncan,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah, I got played on the radio when I was like 18, 19 when I was Pat Duncan. Yeah. It was like and I was also part of this one project. The first time I was ever on Pat Duncan's show as part of anything was as part of this thing that me and Bruce and Jack did in '83, and we called it Lead Kennedys, with lead spelled like Led Zeppelin. Lead Kennedys, get it? And yeah. And those guys, you remember the whole joke band thing, about the whole, the sophisticados and suburban vermin and this whole joke band war going on. Well, we formed a band, and our we were an anti-joke band joke band. And we only made one tape, and we gave it to Pat, and God only knows where it is. We don't even know if there's a copy of it, but and it was like songs like Joke Band War Can't Take It No More. And we were just like, so here are the Sophisticados forming another group singing about how the Sophisticados are a joke. So that was Led Kenny's. That was my first time on Duncan, and then just after that, I managed to convince Tom and Bruce to back me, and we formed Ray Brazen and the Fruit and Cereal Lovers, and we made a little bit of noise in a couple of sessions over at SCS, Second City Studios in Elmwood Park, which was responsible for a lot of stuff, actually. I think its importance in New Jersey hardcore is underestimated, actually, because so much stuff came out of there. AOD recorded the first demo there, that famous version of Paul's Not Home.
Mhm.
And the Fart Heads formed there, and Death Rage formed there, and Bedlam practiced there all the time. AOD practiced there all the time. Raisin Bran, the Fruit and Cereal Lovers, and it was in this little house. And the first Studio A, it was like $10 an hour, and if you rented two hours on the weekends, you got a third hour free. So it was like 3 hours for $20, and it had a 4-track machine hooked up to a cassette deck, so you could record in there. So those guys would just go in and just like work out arrangements right there, and just like make takes on the spot. And that's all the Death Rage and Fart Heads and Fruit and Cereal Lovers stuff, and a lot of other stuff too.
I just saw not too long ago, I guess Morning Noise was out in Vegas, and
Mm-hmm.
Tommy and Steve were at the Punk Rock Museum.
Mm-hmm.
And apparently, if I remember correctly, there's a photo of a Fart Heads t-shirt.
Yeah, well, there might be. Yeah, I mean, stranger things have happened. I can't believe there's a fucking museum and it's in Las Vegas.
I
It's just
know.
like, I mean, it's a cool idea, but like, in Vegas, really? What's this world coming to? It's a museum. I mean, things are fucked up right now. Fucking people are dying. Another punk rocker, another musical hero is dying like every second or third day now, or sometimes three in one day. We just lost David Thomas and David Johansen, and I all down the line. I've lost track. I've forgotten names because there's so many.
Yeah, yeah, unfortunately, it's like dominoes.
Yeah.
At least that's how it feels lately. There's a lot of other people too. Dave Allen from Gang of Four. I mean, no, it's just Al Baril, the great Al Baril from
Oh
SS.
yeah. Oh yeah. SSG, fantastic band. Yeah.
Oh yeah, and a fantastic guy too.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
really
I
like
saw it.
Al a lot.
Yeah.
So the way I look at it, 'cause, funny enough, I mentioned before we started recording, I'm in the process of destroying my archives here, or just reorganizing things to find things to donate to a museum in Chicago. A
Uh
friend of
huh.
mine does a museum, Martin Atkins. He does a museum for industrial and post-punk out
Uh
there.
huh.
So I'm in the process of like digitizing things and like sending him the source material so he can put it, display it
Yeah,
somehow. Because, life is so short. And,
yeah,
if God forbid something happens to me, whoever comes into this apartment to clean it out is not going to know half the shit that's here. So
yeah.
I gotta give it somewhere, put it somewhere where people who understand the history are going to appreciate it.
I'm
So
glad people are preserving the history. We have to preserve this history while we still can, because I don't think we have much time left. I think time is running out. And I'm just getting more creative than ever before and working harder than ever before on the creative shit that I do, because I just like I just don't feel we have much time left with things as fucked up in the world as they are right now. And people, all the good people are dying. It's like, why can't we wake up and hear some asshole politician died instead?
yeah, exactly. And
Or
I
three of them. I mean, I'm not suggesting that, but
well, I mean, I try not to be a doomy and gloomy person, although it just happens on occasion. But, I think it's good to operate with the idea that this could all end pretty goddamn fast.
yeah,
Oh, I mean, we don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. I have an idea of
exactly.
how the rest of today is going to go, but something could fall on my head from a great height at 5 o'clock today, and that's it.
Yeah.
So I think the more people think that way, the
Hmm.
more productive we all get, the more we chronicle things. I mean, I've had at least two guests pass away who've been on this channel since I started it.
Yeah, I know, I know.
Rest in peace, BT, Jack Russell.
Oh yeah, I noticed. Yeah,
So
you talked to Jack Russell like just a few days later he was dead, right?
well, it was a couple months beforehand, but I was really friendly with Jack, and it's one
Yeah,
of those things where it's like, oh, I should text Jack and see how he's doing, because I
yeah,
knew he'd been pretty sick. And sure as shit, man, I was actually like bookmarking time. I'm like, okay, tonight I'm gonna text Jack, no matter what. I
yeah,
get distracted,
yeah,
there's a million things going on, but I'm like, I
yeah. That's
can't,
true.
I'll put everybody else aside and I'll text Jack and see how he's doing.
And you did just in the nick of time, because then, right? Yeah, it's true. It's like, tell the people that you know that you love, tell them that you love them.
Yeah,
Tell them
exactly.
now, because tomorrow, is might be too late, because especially the way everything is shuffling off this mortal coil now. It's crazy.
But the real bitch of that was, I'm like, okay, Thursday night, I'm gonna text Jack, see how he's doing. That fucking day is when he died. And it's like,
Yeah,
oh, I didn't get that chance.
yeah,
So, that's why I do this. I mean, not to get too doom and gloom by any means,
yeah,
but well, I mean, we'll go back to motherfucking Kaprosky in a second, but the whole point of it is you got to chronicle things, you got to share the stories because we're 45 years past the time that we're talking about.
yes,
Thankfully, so many people are still here. We'll get into AOD and the fact that they're still playing, things are
yeah.
still kind of happening, but you never know. So, I love the fact there's a punk rock museum. I I think it's weird it's in Vegas too, but at least
Yeah.
something exists for that because
Mm.
it's important. And the
Yeah.
funny thing is, I'm sure you felt this way too. You don't realize these things are important until many years later.
Yeah, exactly. It's like back in '79 when I was first hearing about the Misfits in a Walgreens, from somebody that I just met, and they were from two towns away. Nobody knew. I mean, who knew that they were going to be doing all these big shows, playing Coachella? You don't know what's going to happen. Who knew that all these records that we were paying $2 for,
Yeah.
like, were going to be $2,000 on eBay 40 years later?
Yeah.
Who knew that I was going to be reading about my participation in the first AOD show in a fucking book like 40 years later by the drummer?
Yeah, yeah, and that's a funny thing that I've landed in a few books because I was in LA for a few years and did stuff out there. Now that stuff is coming out in books, and it's like I was crashing on people's couches, like trying to think about where my next meal was going to come from. I couldn't think that
Yeah.
something I was doing then would be valuable enough to be in a book 20 years later. But that's how this stuff happens. So.
I'm starting to see band names in books that are available at Barnes and Noble that I never thought I'd ever see in a fucking book? It's
Yeah.
crazy.
Yeah. Well, it goes to show that, things that were happening in that era were important,
Yeah, they
and
definitely were. They were important to a lot of people, and a lot of people remember them fondly. I mean, shit. I mean, here we are all these years later, 40, 50 years later, we're the new hippies. We're like sitting around talking about punk rock.
right.
We're in our 50s and our 60s. Shouldn't we be listening to like Lawrence Welk now? Should we bellowed out like Geritol and all that crap? But no, we're still punk rockers. Just goes to show you that like taste in music is something that's transcended of age because I mean, my dad was still listening to old 50s rock and roll like right up to his death, and he lived to be 80. So I'm gonna be punk rocking till I'm 80 if I make it that far. So
Oh yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So, swinging back to the FMU thing, I know as well you and Irwin
yes.
recorded a cover of Institutionalized by Suicidal.
Oh yeah, yeah.
You
Yeah, it
know,
was just that it was meant as being kind of sort of satirical actually. We just wanted to do a lo-fi kind of thing, because like the way I met Irwin was because his show was right after Pat Duncan's. So after I found love at WFMU, that's kind of sort of became a crossover hit for me, and other people at the station noticed, hey, word got around that there was this dude on the Pat Duncan show who wrote a song about finding love at WFMU, and people thought it was cute. So Irwin, who was, again, was on after Pat, he reached out to me and he said, I have an idea to do this cover version of Institutionalized, but I need someone to play guitar on it. Can you do like this, acoustic, sort of track, like lo-fi sort of track of it, the song instrumental as best you can, and then send it to me so I can put a vocal over it? And I said, yeah, I'll do it. And I gave him like, it's actually a track of me playing my electric guitar unplugged in. It's not an actual acoustic, which is why it sounds that way. And I gave it to Erwin, and he just put like this really like twee little nerdy like rendition of it, of the whole Mike Muir rap on it, and we put that out, and there were some people who wanted to murder me for it.
did you get any actual feedback from the suicidal camp?
No, I never did. They never got to hear it. We just at least I don't. They haven't heard it to my knowledge, and if so, I haven't heard that they've ever heard it. But it became fairly popular on WFMU, and I think now and then it still gets played actually. And I think I Found Love at WFMU still gets played on FMU now and then too. Those songs have kind of sort of like become ingrained into the fabric, along with all the other great things. Because I mean, so many of the things that we know today, terms like outsider music and acts like Daniel Johnston or Stevie and all these other things, all of that popularity stemmed very largely from WFMU's influence in terms like, and Irwin coined the term outsider music, which we use all the time. And Bill Berger came up with lo-fi. We hear that bandied about all the time now. All of that sprung from the 80s, WFMU. It was like really historical. And that's amazing too, because I mean, now you have WFMU able to transmit all over the world on the web, wherever. But back then, they were just broadcasting locally to New York, New Jersey. There was no internet, they couldn't broadcast out there, but word got around, People were mailing tapes to people out of town of WFMU, in other states and other countries. It got around. And then when the internet came, they had the smarts to be one of the first stations to jump on that. And when they did, they took over the world. And now they're still going strong all these years later. They probably could not have survived as just the local station, if there had been no internet. Now they would probably be gone. But thanks to the internet and thanks to them being smart enough to do that, they're still here and they're still thriving, which is great. Power to
Yeah,
them all the time.
absolutely. I mean, a lot of the faces have changed there
Oh
over
yeah.
the years, and I don't listen as much as I used to.
Not me neither, but I'm aware, I still listen to like special things, and I still like that they're there, and I mean, for me, the peak period was the 80s. I still have tapes of FMU in the 80s that I listen to sometimes, and so I got involved with the whole lo-fi scene after the institutionalized thing too, because I started giving my tapes to Irwin instead of Pat. It's like, okay, I'm gonna, I was kind of moving away from the hardcore thing by like 84, 85. Those guys took me to see the Butthole Surfers at CBGB in September of 1984, and I was like, "There's something beyond hardcore here," and that changed my life. And I started getting into like crazier stuff from there. And yeah, so by 1986, there was another DJ on FMU called Bill Berger, who hosted a show called Lo-Fi. He started a show called Lo-Fi in early 1986, and it was a half-hour program on Friday evenings from 6 to 6:30, and showcased home taping, all the stuff that was started on Pat Duncan's show, like was extending over now into this other thing, an extension of what was going on there, and that was lo-fi. And he solicited tapes from listeners, and people sent in stuff, and he'd play it, and I contributed a whole bunch of tapes to it. And yeah, he became one of my biggest fans. He really championed me, and a whole scene grew out of that. So it was fantastic. So all of that stuff is like, I mean, and now there's like, I'm gonna have to send you a link. There's like this little book available online, written by some professor of culture at Oxford University about the history of lo-fi, and it talks about lo-fi and Bill Berger and me, and it's pretty great stuff. You're gonna have to see it. I'm gonna get some links out there soon.
Yeah, yeah, please do.
Yeah.
That's definitely great stuff. Of course, for me, I think my entry point to the idea of lo-fi would have been obviously Daniel. Um,
Mhm.
and then, even like the earlier guided by voices.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. They're great. Yeah. That early stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, and I played a show with Guided by Voices about 20 years ago out in Los Angeles. Actually, it was more than that. Um, the band I was in at the time, we played with Guided by Voices and the Circle Jerks.
Oh yeah. Circle jerks.
And what a band, Guided by Voices. I've never seen them live since because I don't want to tarnish the memory of
Yeah.
the show I saw them play. I
Yeah.
mean, there was a time, I'm sure they're still fantastic.
Yeah. I feel the same way about going to see the Misfits now. Yeah, I've seen the YouTube videos. I mean, quite honestly, I thought Morning Noise blew the Misfits off the stage at the Prudential Center, and they took only 20 minutes to do it too.
Well, Morning Noise rehearsed too. I mean,
Yeah. Yeah.
they actually practiced their set, unlike certain people.
Well,
Uh,
I saw, I only saw the Misfits once, and it was in '82, in a carload that went to New York City that consisted of Tommy Kaprowski behind the wheel, me, Bruce Wingate, Steve Zing, and Yuri Vaughn. And we went to see the Misfits, and the Beastie Boys opened up. This is, again, June 1982, so witnessing history here. And, the memory of that night is like it was one of the greatest nights of my life. But at the same time, man, the Misfits totally sucked that night. They were all over the place. They were sloppy. Fucking people were throwing shit at Glenn. Glenn got all pissed off. The show stopped a couple of times. It was, I mean, great band, but they weren't the best of live bands, really.
oh no, no, especially back then. But I saw a bunch of these reunions with Glenn. The last one I went to was MSG.
uh-huh.
After 'cause I saw them in LA, I saw them in Chicago with Glenn, the last 8 years or so.
Uh-huh.
And saw them at MSG, and I'm like, I'm good. Like after you see your friends play at MSG, you
Yeah.
know, it's good. Like
Yeah,
I
yeah,
can't.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Then you've had the experience. It's good, and it's like that's why I mean, I saw DRI back in 1984. I mean, they still play. They come around to Orlando sometimes. It's like I don't need to see them again. I saw them in '84. I saw them fucking with a set list this long, like fucking 6 miles long. They played through the whole set in like 30 minutes. It was like
Yeah, I
because every
think
song was like 20 seconds long. It was crazy.
the only band I started seeing well over 30 years ago, and I still see to this day is Agnostic Front.
Oh, yeah, that's cool.
They're like the one band I'll always make a point to see from that era, even though I've seen them like a million times.
Yeah.
Just because I think they're so great live.
Mhm.
But now, I mean, Vinny's like 70 and he's still out there doing it. So you kind of have to go. Um,
See, man, this whole old punk thing really blows my mind. Punk senior citizens. It's like, did we sing old people talk loud back in the 80s? I mean, it's like now we have to face that shit ourselves, man. We're talking loud now, and we smell bad and we walk slow and all that other happy horse shit now. It's like, I think Jim Foster said something to the extent like, weren't they thinking about like the future when they, it's like, okay, you're writing old people talk loud, but one of these days you're going to be the very people you despise.
Right. Well, now it's a Sunday matinee because everybody has to be in bed by 9. So
Yeah, exactly.
it's like,
Yeah, it's not like they go to somebody's house afterward and drink until midnight, right?
yeah, it's like I went to go see Roxy Music a couple years ago.
Uh,
They came back around, more or
yeah.
less the original lineup without, but and I'm sitting there, and there's an older couple behind me, like actually a group of people, but they're, like my parents' age, and
Uh-huh.
they're like, "Oh, I hope the show ends early because I want to be in bed by 11." I'm thinking the band wants to be in bed by 11. I'm sure you're fine.
Well, I mean, we've come a long way from the days. I mean, another thing, back in the 80s, it was not unusual for shows to go until like sunrise,
Oh yeah.
with the headlining band going on at like 2 a.m.
Yeah.
Not
I
like
mean,
that anymore. Nowadays, everybody wants to go home early. Nowadays, headlining band, and fucking, if you're not there by 10, you miss out.
yeah, I mean,
Whereas back in those days, you could get there at 1 o'clock in the morning, and the headliners still had an hour to go before they played.
well, I mean, even when I was coming to shows, going to shows in the 90s at the Pipeline, those shows would end super late, and then
Uh-huh.
drive home from friggin' Newark, jump in the shower, sober yourself up. Well, I never drove drunk, for the record.
Yeah.
Wink.
No.
But you go home, you clean yourself up, and you go to work that
Yeah,
Friday.
I know. Yeah, I've had that happen to me many a time. You just go in but you just do it. But you're still. It's like you're not going to sleep after a show. Come on, man. You're still pumped up from the energy of the show, especially if it was a really good one. So.
Yeah. Well, I remember, funny aside, it just came to my mind. I went to, speaking of Alba Real,
Uh-huh.
to a record store opening. There's a place in Massachusetts that in Beverly, Bridge 9.
Uh-huh.
It's a really cool record store. It brings me back to the early days of like a record store being a hub.
Yeah, yeah, I remember those days.
And it was like an opening party. It was a private gathering. I had a buddy who actually built the place who invited me to go. And it was like guys from Slapshot, SSD, Kill Slug, like the whole Boston
Yeah.
crew. And it was a late night. I actually fell asleep in my driveway. Like I got home and just like
Jeez.
passed out. And my neighbor saw me like that. And she's like, you all right in there? Like, what happened? The ironic thing is, what was I doing? Hanging out with a bunch of straight edge guys in Boston. You know, not like it was back 20 years ago when I'd be in my driveway for other reasons, but
Yeah, 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 I know. It's like yeah.
so
Yeah, we were party animals back then. Straight edge wasn't really a big thing in our little northern New Jersey hardcore circle, I'm afraid. I mean, there were a couple of straight edgers, like of course Dave Schwartzman was straight edge, at least for a while anyway. Eventually he fell into that trap. But and another notable straight edger who was, always seems sober to me was Kyle, singer from Bodies in Panic.
hmm,
And who lives in Florida, not too far down from me, and he's had all sorts of health complications lately, unfortunately, but somehow he's still holding together. That's crazy. So I love you, Kyle.
that's good. I'm happy to hear that. We got to get into Bedlam a little bit
Yes, we have to.
because,
Yes,
I've had a few of those guys on, Lenny and of course Tommy. Uh,
Tommy, yeah, Tommy.
and I'm glad you found it because I was looking for my copy, but as I said, I've been tearing my apartment apart lately. You're immortalized on the first Bedlam album.
Yes, I am. Yeah, I'm very much immortalized on the first Bedlam album. Let me see. Can you see that?
Yep,
Yeah, there you go. And blue vinyl too. There were only like maybe about 100 of these made. And they were number two. I have copy number. This is the original, fold out. It was packaged like the 7 inches are, only it was a 12 inch. And then here's the sleeve and all that. And then it opened. And then the original opens up into this big fold out, which is you can see that. It's like, and then there's pictures from SCS and a show that they did at CBGB, the CBGB matinee show. And the SCS pictures are taken by Bruce, and I took the pictures at CBGB at a very crazy, chaotic gig that I actually appeared on stage for one song with them on. I got up there and that they had a cover version of the Flintstones theme.
yeah, yeah.
I got up and he did it live, and somebody had a video camera, and Tom told me before the show, "Yeah, get up there, man." Okay, so I was already hanging out with them at their practices, which were more parties than practices. And, and every time they would go to the Flintstones thing, we'd do it a few times and I'd be like yelling it out with them, as I'm sure you heard on that little recording. And so I got up there and I introduced the song and we sang it. I was like, Flintstones, read the Flintstones, animal the Swiss family. And it was like, thank you, New York. Oh man, I can't believe I'm sitting on stage CBGBs, man. This is like going into this whole spiel. Dave Scott picks me up from behind, carries me off the stage, and then Tommy Kaprowski took the mic and says, okay, kids, now you can beat him up. Pretty neat, huh? I
Well,
can't hear you, man.
no, I'm here. Can you hear me
Oh,
now?
oh, 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 I thought you were, yeah. Where were we? Oh yeah, yeah, my appearance at CBGB with them. So yeah, so Bar R Records, those guys wanted to do an album on Bar R Records, and so they had the money because they were involved in various activities, both legal and illicit, and AOD said, why don't you start a label with the money? And it's like, okay, yeah. And, that's why there were like 4 or 5 records in 1984 because these guys came along from Bedlam. Jim Dunleavy had his own little hustle and a couple other guys did. And that's how Bar Records got into being a real label. And so they decided they wanted to put this picture that they took that Bruce had taken at one of the SCS practices of me standing next to Jim Dunleavy on the label. And of course, you couldn't get me to say no to something like being on the record label of an album or being up on stage. I was one that never said no to any of that stuff because I always wanted to like get up and show off. So I said, yeah, go right ahead, put it on the label. And they put it on the label. And we had a record release party over at the Union Rec Center, which was in nearby Union. This is, those guys were in Irvington, right around the corner from Rebel Rouser Records, at least for a while anyway. And they had but I thought it was brilliant that they had the record release party like locally because it was like, yeah, man, why do we have to go to the city to like celebrate this record? We could just celebrate it on our home turf and like, actually have something to do here for like a Saturday night. So they did that and it was great. And I was signing the record label and everything and acting all like, oh man, I'm starting a fan club. And those guys were like calling me, yeah, shut up, you little pipsqueak. And I was just like, I was a bit of a cocky kid back in those days. So that's how I ended up on the Bedlam record label. And, I thought it was all well and good back then, but all these years later, I look at that picture and I kind of cringe because it actually sort of, I don't know, maybe it's like my 60-year-old mind is suddenly like seeing that, like it could be, construed as something creepy because it looks like Jim is like this big ass pimp and I'm like this little, like, he's taking up some kid off a fucking playground because that's how young I was. The funny thing is, you know, I met Dave Scott. We met Dave Scott at the end of 1980. He was like 15. Now Dave Scott is like he's 1 month younger than me. I'm actually a month older than him. I was born in August, he was born in September. 1 month separates us in age. When I was 15, I looked like I was 12. When he was 15, he looked like he was fully grown,
Mhm.
which is how we managed to hoodwink the guys in East Patterson Boys Choir into having him become their manager. It's like, oh, okay, they didn't know he was only 15 because he looked 18. Meanwhile, I'm the same age, a month older, and I look younger, so it was queer, you know.
Well, it, during this era, we also can add film star to your resume because
Uh-huh. Are you going to talk about those Kaprowski movies?
yes, I am.
Oh
Yes, I
my
am.
goodness. Yeah.
In addition to being the guitarist in Morning Noise and Bedlam, our dear Thomas Kaprowski
Yes.
was also a budding filmmaker, if you want to call it that. And at least one of the movies, Spermoids from Hell, is on YouTube, starring yourself.
Actually, both of them are. That one and the other one is Meat and Potatoes. Yeah, they're both on the Feeney and Goldstein channel. Just look up Feeney and Goldstein, and that'll take you to a channel that has both of those short films on YouTube.
I'll put a link in the video description when I post this.
Definitely.
So you got to tell me about doing those. I watched Spermoids from Hell, and I'm like, fuck this, I can't watch the other one. But you
Oh,
know,
come on.
I'm like, enough of this Tommy shit. I've had enough.
Yeah,
Uh,
but I'm the star of the second one, man. Come on, you gotta watch it.
all right, I'll dive in.
You'll hurt my feelings if you don't watch it. I don't care if Tommy's feelings get hurt, but what about mine, okay?
That's a very fair point.
I
I'll
mean,
go
you can tell
back.
Tommy fuck you all you want. I'll tell him fuck you a few times for you if you want, but like, come on, man. Let's at least show me some respect, man. I'm proud of my Oscar winning performance in Meat and Potatoes.
I will have to check it out, and of course, I will link it to the video as I said. So all those residual royalties can start raining down on
Yes, I
you,
hope so. Yeah, yeah,
and
yeah,
it'll
yeah.
be
I may have to sue Tommy for those. I don't know. I haven't
that's
seen the
right,
suit yet.
because he's using your likeness all these years later without
Yeah, right.
compensation.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I have to imagine at least Spermoids from Hell, um, uh, the Citizen Kane of New Jersey hardcore movies. Um, I'd have to imagine that was done in like an afternoon, maybe, or
Yeah,
you know,
yeah, yeah, in an afternoon or two. Well, Tommy was taking film classes at William Patterson College, and he was making short films for the class. So he decided, we were both really into the whole horror gore thing by that time, and the films of guys like George Romero, Night of the Living Dead, like or Herschel Gordon Lewis, like Blood Feast and the Gore Girls, things like that. And Tom wanted to make a couple of films along those lines. So Spermoids from Hell was kind of influenced by H.G. Lewis in a way, brought to toxic New Jersey, where sperm from condoms on the riverbank of the Passaic River, absorb chemicals and turn into these giant killer spermoids that attack everybody in their path, including me and Bruce Wingate. And then the other one in Meat and Potatoes, I play somebody who gets a revenge on a bully who's trying to shake me down for some money I allegedly owe him. And not only do I get my revenge, but I totally mutilate his body in the end. So you have to see that one. Yeah, Jim Hogan played the bully in that one. He was a guy we met at WPC, William Patterson College, and yeah. Speaking of the time that Tommy and I both went to William Patterson College, you ever see the video of him being interviewed by that totally clueless ditz on
yes,
that student affairs program? And she's
yes.
like, now a band like the B-52s, would they be considered hardcore? I mean, isn't that the funniest? And Tommy is just so pissed off. It's just so amazing. I love that video. Is so funny. I've watched it a million times and I still think it's the funniest thing he ever did.
Well, it is funny to see stuff like this in 2025 on YouTube. Kind of going back to our earlier point about there being a museum and all this stuff. I look at 2025 and here we are 45 years later, let's say, as far as New Jersey hardcore. We see Morning Noise doing what they're doing now. AOD's playing in England, and when
Yeah,
AOD swings back around, it's kind of, people really get excited over that, Um, the Bedlam stuff was reissued on vinyl a couple years ago
yeah,
in Beer
yeah,
City.
amazing. Yeah,
So there's still this tremendous interest in that particular period of time. With the benefit of hindsight, now that we're 45 years later, what do you think it was about those bands at that time that even today still attracts that kind of interest? And, like look at the Misfits fandom and people argue over the most minuscule bullshit about that
yeah,
band.
yeah, yeah.
You know, now that we're away from it, what do you think it was that really made it something so relevant to where even today, we're having conversations about.
I think because I mean, okay, it's punk rock, so we talk about the punk. Let's talk about the rock. I think it's still here because it's rock
Hmm.
and rock and roll never dies. That's that. I think it's as simple as that. Actually, I don't think it gets any more complicated than that. As far as the culture goes, I mean, the culture still resonates today because, like, the punks of that time were warning people. Like, if we don't change, things are going to get worse. And now things are even worse now. So now, like, punk is as a message too is relevant because even more relevant than now because it's the same message only worse. I mean, it's getting so that like the Reagan days look like the best days of our lives. It's crazy. And I still remember how everybody was anti-Reagan and everybody was afraid he was going to start World War III and all this different shit. I didn't like Reagan either, but compared to some of today's politicians, I won't name names, it's just amazing how time is like tempered. Like, I mean, no disrespect to the Sex Pistols, but they're not shocking anymore. They're just going out and they're playing God Save the Queen and people love them.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I think you're absolutely right. There comes a point where you relocate. You
Yes.
move down to Florida.
Uh-huh.
Um, how long ago did that happen?
That happened 20 years ago. Yeah. And when I came down here, I think Dave Scott had already been down here for like about 10 years before I came down here, because like he moved down here in the early 90s and I moved down here like 10 years later. So 2004.
Yeah, a couple other people are down there. I know Doug from Pleased Youth
Yeah.
down there.
Oh yeah, oh, yeah. As a matter of fact, he came to Dave Scott's book release party. He
Mm,
had a book release party down here, and I bought his book. And yeah, it's all about Tom Kaprowski. That book, it's amazing.
yeah, I think there's a movie
You
or
gotta have a drinking game, like take a shot. Like every time he mentions Kaprowski, will be fucked up a third of the way into the book.
you think by now people have figured out a way to get away from Tommy,
Yeah,
but
yeah, right.
he just keeps. I think it's hysterical that he's in a band with Steve Zing.
Yeah.
I love both of those guys, but Steve, bless him, is a very
Mhm.
serious guy. You know what I
Yes,
mean? He
yes, he
takes
is.
stuff, and Tommy's. I mean, we all joke, but Tommy's obviously a very talented guy and a sweetheart of a human being. But I can just imagine those two. Like, how does that work?
I don't know. I have no idea how it works. I haven't gotten close enough to them to even like sort of even have a clue as to how they get along. So, but I mean, that's too funny. Then you see, this is the funny thing about Morning Noise versus Bedlam. So Tom left Morning Noise to be in Bedlam. Now, Tom, I just want to take this time to say that Tommy was one of my biggest influences on guitar. He inspired me to pick up a guitar. He taught me a lot of things about guitar. I used to sit in his room sit on his bed and watch him play guitar, play his Les Paul through his Fender amp, play along the Dead Kennedys records, and just watch his hands and just be fascinated by how great a guitar player he was. So every band that he joined, he added something to. Even Raisin Bran the Fruit and Cereal Lovers, he added some nice little touches too. Because he was just an amazing guitarist. I considered him the James Williamson of Elmwood Park, New Jersey. So he was in Morning Noise, who were they were really tight, serious band. And all of a sudden he leaves them and he joins Bedlam. Now, Morning Noise were like this really good, tight, professional band, and Bedlam were a bunch of party animals who were like, I mean, their music was great, their songs were great, but they were just like a total wreck at the time that like Tommy joined them. And the first couple of times I saw them, they were like a total train wreck live. And at first I was kind of sort of confused. I was like, Tom, why are you leaving a band like Morning Noise for a band like this, man? You're a musician. You're too good for these guys. These guys can't play. And I think looking back, I think it was more because the guys in Morning Noise were like, very straight laced. I met them, they didn't smoke pot and drink and anything. They were just like, concerned with like, the music over the thing. And meanwhile, Bedlam were total party animals, which also described Tommy. So he fit more in with Bedlam. So it might have been a personality thing. And here's where I'm headed. Tommy, again, like I said before, had an ability to like make whatever band anything he touched, he made sound better because he was so good on guitar.
Yeah.
And he was the one who really whipped Bedlam into shape and made them into a powerhouse. So when they made those two records, they were totally on. I mean, he turned them into a fierce little powerhouse, and he had his amazing little touches on guitar to everything. And that's why Bedlam got as good as they got. Really, a lot of the power on those records is from Tom.
Yeah, and even today,
Yeah.
even today he's got that. I mean, great player. I coaxed Morning Noise back together in '97
Uh-huh.
to do I was booking an American Legion Hall at the time, and I had become friendly with Steve through the whole Misfits thing.
Yeah.
So, I asked Steve if he wanted to do a reunion show, and he graciously contacted the fellas and said, we should do this. So they all came up to play behind a shop right at a VFW hall in
Uh-huh.
New Jersey.
Oh,
And
that's great.
we were just watching the band I was in at the time. We were, of course, right in front. Um, But we're watching Tommy playing, doing his downstroking, and like our jaws are on the ground. We're like, look at this guy play.
Yeah, right.
And you see him beforehand, and he's classic Tommy. You're like, who's this fucking guy? But then he'll get up there and play, and you're just like, I think he's our Steve Jones. You said James Williamson as an excellent comparison. Steve Jones, Johnny Ramone, he's our guy.
He was a very versatile player. He took so much, not just from punk, but from just from anything he heard. Because I mean, where we grew up in northern New Jersey, it was a melting pot of music. Because that's how I got the music bug. Because I was born into a family where everybody loved it, and I heard it everywhere I went. So yeah, and Tommy drew from a lot of different styles to create what he did, because he was listening to everything and he had a keen ear for great guitar. I mean, not just from punk, but from other things. I mean, he and I were both really big fans of Creedence Clearwater Revival, for example.
Mm.
And the main thing he liked about it was John Fogerty's guitar. He's like, oh, he always had the greatest guitar tones. He plays great fucking solos. He looked up to that too. So,
Yeah.
you know,
Just, crazy talent coming out of Jersey, 80s and 90s. Tommy, obviously, Jim Foster.
Yeah, yeah, he was great too. Yeah, I remember those early days, AOD, the first record coming out. I remember being so excited that, hey, man, I know these guys and they're putting out a record. And then the following year, I'm involved with the creation of the Bedlam record. So it's like,
Yeah.
yeah, it was exciting. It was so much more exciting than it is now. Punk rock to me, today's punk rock to me doesn't really excite me. It's like to me, it's just like there's a zillion bands out there. The next generation and the generation after that, and so many of them just seem like the same old thing to me. Or maybe I'm just too old, or maybe I just like to hear stuff that's more original these days, or.
Well, the problem I'm seeing is it is still kind of focused on the older guys now. Like
Yeah.
like AOD is playing, like I said, AOD is playing, the Sex Pistols are playing, which is all great, but where's the next band? I mean, Green Day is like 35 years old now.
Yeah, I know. They're still
It's
out
like,
there, and it's all way past their prime. And here's the other point I want to make, though, that really impresses me. EOD's back out there, Misfits are back out there, Fear's back out there, Circle Jerks back out there. All those bands are just going out there and fucking sweating to the oldies, not doing anything new. They're just playing all their old stuff. Meanwhile, in Morning Noise, they come out, they find a new front man, they jump right ahead of the pack, they completely fucking throw out almost their entire repertoire, write a
yeah.
whole bunch of new songs, put out a whole fucking big new album, and just get on out there. And then they get out to the Prudential Center and they fucking completely wipe the goddamn stage with the Misfits fucking moppy little fucking double locks. I mean, seriously, man. Yeah, that it's like why can't more bands do that? Morning Noise just like totally threw out the rule book for like bands reuniting 40 years later. It's like, okay, here's Bullet for the millionth time, blah blah blah. No, here's the new song, man. It's called We Want You Dead. I was listening to that album in the car yesterday. It's magnificent. It's one of the best things Kaprowski's ever been involved with. And Robbie Michael, the new front man,
Yeah.
he's really earned the torch. He's like one of the few like millennials I can think of who actually, has street cred with the Misfits and that whole circle and that whole organization. He's well studied and he's been a Misfits fan ever since the cradle. I mean, compare that with like, the last person I saw in a Misfits t-shirt around here was like maybe about a 15-year-old kid at some strip mall. And it's like, what do you say to a 15-year-old kid in a strip mall, like about the Misfits? I can't talk to them. It's like, what do I do? Oh, I saw the Misfits in 1981 or 1982. It's like, do you think they'd be interested? Do you think they even care, or is it just a shirt they got at Hot Topic?
Well, one of the reasons why I'm kind of done going to Misfit shows, I mean, who knows how many more there are going to be, is to that point. Like, when you see Glenn and those guys do the same 20 songs, you're like, okay, I've seen them already.
Yeah, exactly.
Um, the one thing I will credit Jerry only for, because I was with Jerry a lot when he got that band back together, when he got
Uh huh.
Michael Graves and Chud.
Yeah.
He made it a point because I was in the room with those conversations. Like he just did not want to play the old stuff. He's like, we're going to write new material, and we're going to get a singer who doesn't sound like Glenn. I remember that because he had a guy who was like hanging around rehearsing with them who looked just like Glenn, sounded just like Glenn, and they were like, the guy's cool, but there's no chance.
Yeah.
I don't want to repeat the past. And I'm like, that's great. The fact that he had the name, all the expectation, and he's like, you know what? We're going to do something different with the name. We're not going to
Yeah, yeah,
really.
that was good. Now it's Morning Noise's turn for that. And I think
Yeah.
Morning Noise is doing even better than the I mean that Misfits comeback stuff was okay, but I think Morning Noise is like 10 times better than that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, look, I mean, if we're gonna, go there, Morning Noise was better in '82, man.
Yeah, they were, but I mean, as far as in terms of the later day Misfits versus the modern day Morning Noise is what I'm talking about here. I'm not talking about the old stuff. Yeah, I agree with you. The nothing compares to the old stuff. They were definitely better in '82. They could have brought back that old front man. He very different personality to say the least in that band. But the songs, yeah, they were definitely better back then. Yeah.
Yeah. So,
But it's full of new stuff. But then on the other hand, it might be thrilling to like get something new. But I mean, the original Alice Cooper group like just announced that they're putting out their first record in fucking 50 years. Man, I heard a song from it and it wasn't that great. It's like you got all these expectations, but you can't set them up too high because it's all these years later and we're not young men anymore.
yeah, I mean, well, sometimes you just can't go back to the party either.
Yeah.
That's what makes things special. Like going back to SSD and Al, there was always talk about them reforming and
Uh-huh.
doing like one more thing. And Al was always having health issues before he got really, really sick.
Uh-huh.
So it's always kind of like, oh, we'll try it in a couple of years, sort of thing. But in a way, it's like them and Minor Threat. It's nice they didn't come back.
Yeah, those are the bands that like didn't tarnish their legacy. They were just like, okay, we had our time. It's like, yeah, and meanwhile, like there's a new Black Flag now. Greg Ginn won't give up. It's like, where does he have to go from here? He has nothing left to say.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what the incentive is. I would suspect,
Money probably.
yeah,
Yeah,
that and maybe just because, what else is he gonna do? You know,
that's true. Yeah.
um, I
This
mean,
is his life. Yeah. It's like, what else would we do if we didn't do music or creativity? This is what we want to do. We never wanted to do anything else. That's why these old punks still like talking about the old days and like, but it's great that we're preserving it all. We don't want to have this get lost. We want future generations. But it's just amazing, thinking of all the stuff that I did all these years ago that's history now. It blows my mind that it's history now, and it blows my mind that I write about the old days online on my Brazen blog, and like and academics cite it for their big theses about like the good old days of Williamsburg in the 1980s and the 1990s before it became a gentrified hellhole.
right, right. Well, we see what's happened to New York, I mean,
Yeah, oh, definitely. I mean, I can't even live there anymore. I mean, the allure of New York was it was just a cheap place to live, and it was dangerous, but that was part of it.
now, I mean, I will say in fairness, because I go down there now and again because my friend Drew Stone puts on shows at Tompkins Square Park.
Uh-huh.
There's the Bowery Electric, which is Jesse from Heart Attack. That's his place.
Oh yeah.
And he does matinees. As a 48-year-old, I'm thrilled that it's not a hassle to go down to New York anymore. And yes, you can go to the 7-Eleven. I can wear a suit jacket when I'm at a show and not be worried about getting mugged. That's great at 48, but I miss the days when I was in my teens going down to New York and you'd have to worry about getting jacked. You'd have to worry about having a knife put up to your throat when you were parking your car. There was a certain sort of attractiveness to that lifestyle,
Uh-huh.
but I'm happy that things are somewhat safe now for me.
Yeah, I mean, well, I play it safe nowadays too. I mean, I don't party as hard as I used to anymore. It's like, and a lot of times I'm home by midnight, sometimes earlier. I don't even care to stay out late anymore. I mean, every now and then I might still do it, but I don't do it every weekend like I used to.
Oh,
I mean, I used to come home at 4 in the morning, sleep 6 hours, and then go back out and party again.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
I don't do that anymore, man. Fucking, I'm lucky if I fucking even feel like going around the store to the supermarket the next day.
Yeah, yeah, you're done for the
Yeah,
week
exactly.
following.
I can't, but I used to do that, Friday night, go out, and of course this was after work, right? And then coming home 3 in the morning, sleeping till 10, waking up, maybe having breakfast. Okay, back out to New York, see some friends, stay out late, go to another show, back to, it was insane. And I still have enough energy on Sunday to do a few things, but like I
Yeah,
can't do that anymore.
no, not a chance. I wanted to get into your music a bit further because I'll link your Bandcamp page
Okay.
when I post this because you have a lot of material.
Yes, I do.
And you've been very prolific on your own steam recording things, again, largely in that the sort of lo-fi world.
Yeah, yeah.
But there's a ton of stuff there, and I would recommend that the viewer who's new to Ray's music definitely go check that stuff out, especially if you're into the Daniel Johnston thing and Guided by Voices. It's very much within that, not exact. I don't want to say it's exactly
Yeah,
like.
I don't really consider either of them an influence. Actually, I can see, you're comparing to it in terms of the aesthetic, the lo-fi thing, which is what they're both a part of. But I don't really see myself quite like either one of those. I have, different influences. I'm influenced more by the lo-fi my friends did, like Bill Berger and Terry Folger did in the lo-fi days. I'm influenced more by that stuff.
Mm. How active are you in the present as far as producing stuff?
Well, I'm still doing music. I mean, I have a new project now called Los Jarritos, which is me and this drummer named Caesar, and we've been making some recordings and playing some gigs out here in the Orlando area, and sometimes I play solo too. I've been doing that, and every time I do a show, the Orlando Weekly writes about it because I'm friends with the people at the Orlando Weekly, and they like my music, so I'm always getting press, and people come to the shows. It's not like a big thing, but it's like I built my audience a small chunk at a time, I mean, every time a person comes to your show and says they like it, that's another fan. So and eventually over time they add up. So even if it's only a few people come to your shows, it'll build up over time. But I just do it because I like it. I just do it because even after all these years, I'm still Davey Dawson, I'm still Ray Brazen, I'm still doing this because that's just the way I've always been. I've always gotten the most pleasure from creating stuff, especially music and writing, and that's how it'll always be.
Absolutely. Well, as I said, there will be plenty of links in the video description. I really encourage people to check this stuff out.
Thank you, thank you.
I've been diving into it. It's quite a bit. You've really been prolific.
Yeah,
So
I got tons more stuff I'll probably never put out. And it's like, I mean, that's only like a tiny little section of like all the hundreds of tapes I have of my recordings. Some of which are really great, and some of which are like totally unreleasable. Not meant to be heard by the public. But I think I put out a pretty good cross section of what I have.
yeah, absolutely.
And it's from every era too, from when I started recording in the early '80s right up to the present. So
Yeah, yeah. And of course, I found love at WFMU was up there, and
yeah,
you know, there's a lot of stuff from, like as you said, various times over the years. To kind of circle back, to kind of conclude things with, I had Andy from Pleased Youth on.
oh yeah, I remember him. Oh yeah, Andy, I remember him and Harpo. I used to hang out with those guys. He used to call me Junior Mouse. It's like I was hanging out with them in the Clinton parking lot, the Clinton High School parking lot, the night of the AOD show that I came in and I almost got killed in the dog cage, which I still haven't completely forgiven those guys for, even to this day. I mean, I buried the hatchet with those guys on other things, but I'll never completely forgive them for the dog cage incident because I almost died that night at age 16, live on stage in front of an audience of very rowdy rednecks who did not like us at
Mhm.
Clifton High School. Just wanted to get that in. But anyway, you were saying,
Well, I asked Andy this question because obviously, when you're talking about New Jersey hardcore, AOD comes up, Buy Our Records comes up, the Misfits always come up, Morning Noise. Who were some of the bands of that era that you think even today deserve more of a second listen? Who are some of the underdogs who, maybe people don't necessarily forget, but they're not the ones that are thrown out more commonly these
well,
days.
I think definitely Sand in the Face and Bodies in Panic and Cyanamid and My Three Sons and bands like that. And even before that, there was a band, Franche Coma, after the Misfits, was in this other band called the Active Ingredients,
Right.
who put out two singles, and like they are like two of the greatest fucking records ever made in the history of music, in my opinion. I've been obsessed with those records all my life. I met Eddie Enzyme, and he was the one who told me about them. He told me to go to Looney Tunes Records, which was run by the guys in Dramarama,
Yep.
and you can find both of our singles there. So I went there and I bought the Laundromat Loverboy single, took it home, loved it so much I went right back to the record store and bought the other record. And really, if I would love to know the whole story of the Active Ingredients and know if they ever played any gigs or made any more recordings or had any more songs besides those, because those two records are like two of my all-time favorite records.
Yeah, I gotta talk to Franche. I've had him on the channel,
Yeah, I know you have,
but
but
that
you
was
didn't really talk about that. You didn't talk that much about. You
yeah.
should hear those records if you haven't heard them. They're great.
Oh yeah, I definitely have heard them, and I've run into Eddie over the years. I gotta meet up with him again because the last time I saw him, it wasn't really positive. It was at a memorial service for someone,
Yeah.
so I gotta meet up with him again in a more positive setting. But I gotta get Franche back on because when I had him on, it was mostly about his new band that he's got with John Steele from EF,
Uh-huh.
few other people, but obviously he's got this crazy history, and um, active ingredients should be spotlighted more because obviously that was also Mike Morant's,
Yeah,
Chris's.
yeah. Yeah, he also died recently, man. Too
Yeah,
bad you didn't have him on before he died. Maybe he could have shed some light.
yeah, I would have loved to. Obviously you don't know when someone's gonna cash it in or not, but I had Erie on not too long after that, and Erie talked a little bit about because they did an album together in the '90s,
Yeah.
Uneasy Listening.
Uh-huh.
I've known Chris a long time. So, yeah, thank you for mentioning that because I really should try to get more of an active ingredients. Maybe I can
There
get,
we go. I got somebody on board now. Thank you so much. Great. We could do this together, man.
yeah,
We got to get the word out because those two singles are just the greatest fucking records ever made. I just totally like I have them digitized and I play them in the car and I just turn them up loud and just like totally sing along to Identity Loss every time. It's just
yeah. Well,
there's
that's,
something about those records, and they're the kind of band that like if somebody suddenly unearthed a tape of them doing unreleased songs or live recordings like all these years after the fact, I would probably have a heart attack.
mm.
That's how big I am on them.
Well, I know that stuff, at least the singles have ended up on YouTube.
Yeah,
As,
yeah,
as
but yeah, yeah. Of course, the two singles, but that's it. Yeah.
yeah. And
There was
Mike,
another. There was another band. There was another band. I don't think they were really in the hardcore realm either, but they were called TV Toy.
right. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and I did a fan website for them at their request back years ago, and yeah, and they just found some footage in somebody's basement of them from like 40 years ago, and they just had it digitized and put up on Vimeo. So you know, and that's pretty amazing too. So it's footage
Yeah.
that nobody's ever seen, and everybody thought was completely lost, and then somebody found it in their like attic or something.
Yeah, I mean, and of course, even there's that whole Jersey Shore scene with Mother Records.
Oh yeah, oh that stuff. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Bands like the Burnt. And, yeah,
yeah. The Burnt, Dirge, the Accelerators were on Mother Records, you know,
yeah.
and Ron Noel's still kicking around
Oh
playing.
yeah, he is, man. The accelerators are great, and the parasites,
Yep. There's a lot of history in New Jersey and a lot of different scenes depending on geographically where you go. One of my goals has been trying to catch as much of it as I can. Like I just not too long ago had Tommy from Social Decay on,
uh-huh.
kind of get the Pine Barrens scene represented in some way. And I'm trying to get Jim Hogan actually. He's been somebody I reached out to.
Oh yeah, definitely, man. Yeah, well, man, he'll tell you about and watch Meat and Potatoes because he plays the bully in that. And then we can talk about that more. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. But let me see what I can do with active ingredients. So I'm in touch with Franche, and I can surely get in touch with
Oh,
Eddie.
this is great, man. We need to do something. Wow. So we're officially a partnership on this, man.
Yeah,
Hey,
so why don't we do
this has
this?
been a very productive chat here, man.
Yeah, why don't I get some legwork going on that? I'll reach out to Frank. Eddie's on my Facebook. I can reach out to Eddie too, and the four of us will get together and we'll chat active ingredients.
Yeah, we'll do that, man. I also want to reconnect with Tommy Kaprowski too. I mean, we've been in touch on Facebook, and we communicated, like, through that, to get me on this show. But yeah, it's been ages since I fucking hung out with that motherfucker. And yeah, I'd like to tell him to his face what a dork he is. And no,
Well, I just did an interview a couple days ago. I had seven people on. It was the first time I had a big group chat recording.
uh-huh,
Maybe what I can do is like a special kind of like, because I've had all the Buy Our Records guys on individually. I've had Chris on and Lenny, not
uh-huh.
Levy yet. I'd love to have Levy on. Uh,
Oh, well, that would be the ultimate, man. Fucking, oh my God, if you have Dunleavy on,
oh, I'd love to. Well, maybe we could.
I'll be able to die in peace afterward if you have Dunleavy on your fucking podcast.
Maybe what I can do
I
is
love that motherfucker. I still love that guy, man.
I I haven't seen him in a good 30 years.
Oh, I haven't seen him in longer than that, man. Really.
He used
A
to,
lot of these guys I haven't seen since the late 80s, but I mean, there's certain people, but
yeah, there are a couple people who need to come on. Danny from Cyatamid.
oh yeah, he would be great. Yeah, too. Yeah, there's I have a whole list too. Put on a shelf and sand in the face.
I'd love to. Yeah. I don't know how to find
I
stuff.
mean, I was going to send you a list, and I keep forgetting. I was going to like type my own list. I'm sure some of the names on it are on other people's lists too. But
Yeah, I mean, like I said, Kaprowski's been amazing. Pat's been chiming in now, and I got a couple. I'll tell you off air who's coming on soon. 'Cause I just got their contact information, but I can't announce it yet. But
okay, I
it's
won't either.
within this world. But I'll tell you when we're done who's going to be showing up. So hopefully, gotta do my text magic and see if they're interested. But I have a feeling they're going to come on.
Oh, that's great.
But yeah, man, we'll have to do this again, and I'll look into that active ingredients thing. I'm sure I can get those guys on, you know,
Yeah, that sounds
and
good.
yeah,
Yeah,
well,
let's do it. Let's do it. Let's get it together and let's see. Yeah, and then let's keep our fingers crossed and hope there's some bolts about the active ingredients. Unreleased material for a big box set. I don't know. That might be wishful thinking, but if it ever surfaced, I'd be like, okay, I can die now. It's like that's a bucket list thing.
yeah, definitely, yeah.
Back down the ghost of the active ingredients. I mean, they did not leave a very long footprint, except I mean, the record's selling for millions of dollars because the guy from the Misfits guitarist was on it.
Right. Well, I know Mike Moran's did that single in '83 under the name Ashley
Oh
Moran.
yeah, that's a cool one too. Yeah, I remember
Yeah,
that one. Yeah.
yeah, he was an interesting guy. I never met him, but he's the guy who was always kind of like off the radar,
Oh yeah.
but doing really cool stuff. That record he did with Erie was
Yeah.
fantastic, and I know very much revered by that whole scene of
Yeah.
people. Um,
Oh yeah.
you know,
Rest in peace, Mike Maytag.
yes, absolutely. And
Mike Maytag. That was his name in the active ingredients. Yeah.
yeah, Mike Maytag, but we'll talk because we'll see what we can do,
Yeah, I think we got something started here, and I haven't even told half the shit I could tell about Tommy Komprowski. We'll have to do that another one. We need another one that we just talk about Tommy actually, and nothing else.
just talk shit about Tommy.
Yeah, yeah, man. I could do that for hours, man.
If I put a call out like to all the people like we're gonna shit on Tommy, I'd
Yeah.
have 40 people on this screen. Everybody would be like this small.
They'd be all waiting. They'd be all sitting back, fucking waiting their turn.
No, in all
No,
seriousness,
he's great. Yeah, but he's great. I always looked up to Tommy, and it's really mind blowing that like his kids are all grown up, and like I just saw the video of his son's wedding. I mean, it was just crazy, man.
good guy, helpful guy.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. I mean, he was an influence on me. Yeah, he shielded me from a lot of bullies, and I mean, he reprimanded me for a lot of shit, and I got into a lot of trouble and got on his bad side once or twice. But who doesn't get on Tommy's bad side, right?
Nah, nah. There are a lot of people in general, not just the scene, but just in the world who say they're going to do something to help. Like, oh yeah, I'll get you that phone number. Oh yeah, I'll do this and do that. That guy always comes through.
He does.
Like Johnny on the spot, ready to help, generous with his time. Here I am saying all this good stuff about the fucking guy. It's making me sick.
Right.
Fuck you, Tommy.
All right, let's hang it up. Come on, man. I love the guy. I love the old Palooka, man. We'll definitely reconnect soon, and maybe we'll
Yeah.
have Tom. Yeah, we got it. Or how about a three-way? You, me, and Tom.
We gotta be
Get
careful.
Tom back on the show. That would be wild, wouldn't it?
We're talking about three-way video, just to clarify. I
Yeah,
don't,
yeah, yeah, yeah. No, no, I'm not talking about any gay stuff. No, I'm
yeah.
I'm just talking. Yeah.
Gotta be careful these
No,
days.
we're gonna have a circle jerk.
There you go.
We're gonna play circle jerks music while we have a circle jerk. Yeah,
That will be the one that gets all the views.
yeah, that'll be the one, man. That'll put you over the top, man. Then we'll all be rich.
Ray, it's been awesome. Come back. We'll
I
definitely
will.
do.
I will definitely come back. Thank you for. Please do invite me back, and I will definitely be back on. And let me know what's going on with it, man. Thank you so much for having me on the show. It's been a pleasure. I really enjoyed this, and I hope you did too.
Yeah, man, absolutely. We'll definitely be in touch, man. I'll see you soon.
Definitely, man. Thanks.